Today we're looking at the best value FPL player in each team. We've got all the players now, we've got all the prices, and once I pick each player, I'm going to class them into one of 5 different categories. We have must own, a good option, players you take or leave, better options, and do not buys. Just because a guy is the best value in his team does not mean you should be considering him. So first up, we have Arsenal. I have to say, when I seen Ben White, my eyes near jumped out of my head. But then I remembered, Saliba's coming back in and there might be some hefty competition for him. So immediately I looked at the right back, Tomiyasu. I thought, amazing value. And, whenever I actually went digging, I realised that he was pretty much the poor man's Tierney. So I think I'm going to pick Tierney for this. I think he is the best value. He beats Tomiyasu when it comes to points over last season. This is looking at the entirety of last season. Both of them managed about 20 appearances, 21 for Tomiyasu, 22 for Tierney. It's 106 points versus 75. Tierney also had a higher XA and actual assist count. He had a higher XG and goal count. He had way more bonus points. So I think I had to settle for Tierney at 5 million over Tomiyasu at 4.5. But I do think, if you need to find that 0.5 somewhere, you could go to Tomiyasu. Next up, Aston Villa, and we're sticking in defence. We're going for Matty Cash at 5 million. I think he could be good value. And if we go over to Hub here and have a look at some of the stats in their Opta tools, he didn't miss a game last season. He started every game. All 38, he started them. He had 37 shots over the season, which was the most of any Villa defender. He scored 4 goals, which was the most of any Villa defender. In terms of XA, he was only behind Lucas Digne. Lucas Digne had 3.68 expected assists and managed 4. Cash had 3.17 and managed 3. But when it comes to points, which is what really matters, Matty Cash scored 147. I think that is absolutely great value there. But I will say, with the competition we have in our defensive slots this season, for me, Matty Cash, he is a take it or leave it option. Think of that what you will. Next up, Bournemouth. And I'll be honest with you, we're not going to be spending a lot of time in the promoted teams today because, to be honest, none of them have amazing starts and none of them have incredible options. But for Bournemouth, if I had to pick one, it would be Dominic Solanke. 6 million, 29 goals and 7 assists last season. He almost scored 3 times as many as the next best scorer in the team, which was Billing. Billing got 10 goals, I believe. Solanke with 29. He has City, Arsenal and Liverpool in the first 5 games, which is going to make it really tough. And he doesn't, I wouldn't imagine, have amazing memories of the Premier League. He can have the baptism of fire. I wouldn't be picking him in my first team. Brentford. So I think at first look, Raya jumped out in goals at 4.5 to a lot of people. But I think once we realised all the goalkeepers are quite competitively priced this season, I'm going to take him out of the equation and look at another 4.5 million player from their back line, and it's Janssen. As we can see here, Janssen had almost double the XG of the next best defender at Brentford. He had 4.52 versus Pinnock's 2.29, and he scored 3 goals, which is decent returns for a Brentford defender in the game. 13 bonus points, 122 overall. I wouldn't be going for him personally. For me, there are better options for your first game week squad. On to Brighton, and we've got Tariq Lamptey as the choice. I think he's a take it or leave it type option, but I'll tell you why I went for him. At 4.5 million, if he's fit, if he plays, which is looking like he might be getting into next season. Unfortunately, he wasn't fit all the last season, but we do remember how exciting he is. I think you have to pick one of the wing backs, and I think I'm going to pick him over Cucurella, who looks like he's on his way out, potentially to Man City or anywhere in Europe. Cucurella coming in at 0.5 million more also put me off the idea, and the XA of Lamptey here with 0.17 XA per 90 versus Cucurella's 0.09 per 90. He also scores more points per 90 than Cucurella when he does play. That's what swung the decision here. Tariq Lamptey's my pick for Brighton. Now we've got Chelsea, and I have to say this one was the hardest to decide because I think there's honestly 3 options who could be argued as must-own, but I've had to pick one. And the one that I have went for is Chilwell. I've left Reece James and I've left Mendy, but I think they're both great options. The reasons I've chose Chilwell are quite self-explanatory. When I sorted the stats by per 90, because that's what I had to do, because he didn't play a hell of a lot last season, but when we do that, he actually had the highest XG of all defenders in the league per 90. So per 90, he was on, his XG was 0.29, and I know it's a small data sample, I know maybe it's a little bit of an anomaly, but, hear me out. In terms of points per 90, he's also the best in the league per 90 when we take players with less appearances than him out of the equation. So 9.15 points per 90 is what he managed last season for the minutes he played. He even got an assist in that short amount of game time. I'm going to put it out there and say if Chilwell remains fit, he will outscore Reece James next season. That's my prediction. I also think Reece James is a great option, by the way. I just think Chilwell will have less competition now with Alonso on the way out by the looks of it. Emerson was off at Lyon. He's back now. He'll probably be on the way out. That role is Chilwell's. If he stays fit, I think he scores brilliant. I actually love the double up. I think Reece James has better expected assist numbers, and on top of that, he's much less injury prone and probably just as nailed. I like the double up here, but I will say you must own one of these guys. Next up, Crystal Palace. Short and sweet. We're going for Mark Gay in defence. It is definitely Mark Gay, isn't it? How to pronounce. We're going for a 4.5 million defender that I would not buy. It's Mark Gay. And the reason for that is this. He plays Arsenal, Liverpool and Man City in the first 4 fixtures, but he is, for me, the best value option at Palace. There's some interesting options up the pitch that could provide value later in the season, but at 4.5 million, decent enabler. 12 clean sheets last season, which was the most outside the top 6. Hit 134 expected points. For me, he's the best budget pick. On to Everton, and there was a couple of options here that kind of tempted me. Pickford in goal sort of raised an eyebrow, but all the goalkeepers have, as I've already mentioned. So I've went for Anthony Gordon. Now, Demarai Gray was also in the mix here, but Anthony Gordon at 5.5 million, I think that could be good value. With everyone wanting some premium defensive options, a premium striker, and probably Mo Salah, you're going to have to make way somewhere, and a 5.5 million midfielder is probably a decent slot to fill. Lampard seems to love him. He got a surprisingly large amount of game time last season for such a young lad, and what I will say is him and Demarai Gray shared a lot of time last season. Gordon does predominantly like to play on that left-hand side, frequented by, you might remember him, big man Richarlison, who's off to Spurs. So I think Gordon will see more game time, and I think he could really make that role his own next season. He would be in my thoughts, but I do think there are better options for your Game Week 1 squad. Next up, Fulham, and there's really only one man for the job here. The best value here for me looks to be Mitrovic. You know, we are going to need a cheap enough forward, and Mitrovic at 6.5 looks like okay value. Personally, I would take or leave him at that price. I don't know if he'll make my team, but with 43 goals in the Championship last season, 7 assists, that 43 goals was the most ever goals scored in a 46-game English season. It was a record. It was absolutely crazy. And Mitrovic has got Premier League experience, so I think he could do well. I do think he could do well, but in 3 of the first 6 games, as we can see here on the hub ticker, he's got Liverpool, he's got Arsenal, and he's got Tottenham. I think that's 3 tough games in the first 6. I would probably be avoiding, but I can see why you take him. Mitrovic, my only pick for Fulham. If you're wondering where I've got this ticker and all these Opta stats and all these other things, point predictions, player comparisons, player profiles, head down to the link in the description, sign up to Fantasy Football Hub and go and check it out for yourself. Time for you to get your edge ahead of the competition coming up to the start of the season. Next up, we have Leeds, and the only pick I could really come up with here, Bamford looked very, very expensive. I was hoping he would have been cheaper. None of the midfielders really stood out to me because I don't really know where the points are going to come from. Rafinha was the only guy beforehand. He's gone. So for me, I went for the goalkeeper, Meslier, however you want to say it. 4.5 million, 143 saves last season, the most of any goalkeeper. Leeds have been doing some beautiful transfer business. Maybe there's a video on that down the line. They've made some really clever signings, some really high potential young lads. I want to see more clean sheets from them next season. Him with those saves and a few clean sheets, there's bonus points to be had. I think he is the best value asset there. For me, there's better options. I probably wouldn't go there. There's better options in goalkeeper. There's better options across the pitch than Leeds players. Next up, Leicester. And with Vardy coming in at 9.5 million, which I think is too much, Maddison at 8 million, which is a little bit saucy, I had to look at defence. And there were a few interesting options at the 4.5 million price point. Ricardo Pereira, James Justin, and Wesley Fofana all coming in at 4.5, but I've picked Pereira as my choice. I think Leicester defenders have dropped in price massively because of how much they underperformed last season in defence, but equally they had a lot of injuries. So if these guys truly are back stronger and they can really put up a fight this season, I think Pereira, you know, before he got into these injury problems, he was linked with the best clubs in the world. I think if he's fit, he nails down that right back role. It is his. I don't think there's any question about that. If Pereira can stay fit, again, I've sorted these by per 90s because of the lack of game time for pretty much all this defence. He had the highest expected points per 90 by quite some way. The highest points per 90, just beat Castagna to be fair. He had the highest expected assists and he had the highest actual assists per 90. I think Pereira is the standout option going forward for Leicester, and I think he's probably the most nailed of them if he's fit. So for me, Pereira is my choice, but I have to say, I do think there are probably better options. Next up, Liverpool. And I was going to be all controversial and say, oh, Mo Salah, 13 million, still the best value. But really, there's only one answer here. You know who it is. All at once, Trent Alexander-Arnold. Has to be. 7.5 million. I will not take any other argument than the fact that he is the best value player in the game for me. I don't care what you say. My mind isn't changing. It's Trent Alexander-Arnold. 12 assists, 32 bonus points, 208 points. Only Salah and Son scored more than him last season. They're coming in at like 13 million and 12 million this season. 7.5 million for 208 points. He's proven it time and time again. He could do even better next season. Mo Salah's staying. Trent at 7.5. Absolute nailed on must have. I won't hear otherwise. On to the next one. Manchester City, and I'm looking at the back again. It's the poor man's Trent. It's Joao Cancelo. Cancelo coming in at 0.5 million less than Trent. He scored 201 points last season versus Trent's 208. Both teams had 21 clean sheets. Cancelo pretty much matched Trent on everything, but he was just a little bit worse. He was the 5th best player in the game last season behind Salah, Son, Trent, Bowen, and then we have Cancelo. He is right up there at 7 million. For me, he's must own. Trent and Cancelo will be nailed in everyone's teams. Over to the red side of Manchester, and we've got United. Now, there's one guy whose value jumped off the page at me here, as I'm sure it did for you. Marcus Rashford, 6.5 million. This is a guy who last year was like 3 million more than that. 3 million more. If he can nail down a starting spot in that squad, I know there's Sancho, I know there's Elanga, I know there's competition. People forget very quickly, you know, before last season, in 21 and in 2020-2021 season, he scored 174 points. In the 1920 season, he scored 177 points. Rashford is a decent FPL option when he's playing. If he can get his head straight, get back in that team, he could be the value player of the season. But there's a lot of ifs and buts there. I think he's a good option getting into the season. But you'll need to wait and see how he does in pre-season, I imagine. Away the lads, and we're off to Newcastle. That was brutal. But Bruno Guimaraes at 6 million for me is the best value option over there. Some people like St. Maximin for 500,000 dearer. I'm a Guimaraes fanboy. I love him. I think he's take it or leave it based off fixtures, but from when he came into Newcastle, he had the highest XA, XG, bonus points, and total number of shots of all Newcastle players. I think at 6 million, he could provide great value in the middle of the park next season. Nottingham Forest, and another one that's somewhat of an unknown to most of us here. Johnson, 6 million at forward, is probably the option here. He's probably the best value in that team, but I don't know. I wouldn't be buying him. You know, there are definitely better ways to be spending your 6 million, but he had 18 goals, 10 assists from left wing / second striker last season, featured in every single game. He is unproven in the Premier League. Definitely one to watch. Over to Southampton, and it's the set piece king is the only option for me. It's James Ward-Prowse, 6.5 million midfielder. He is an absolute killer from the spot as we know it. It takes a wicked free kick. He had the most goals, expected assists, shots, bonus points, and he had 159 points last season versus next best in the squad was Adams with 103. He's the only option there, but even at that, Southampton midfielder, for me, it's a take it or leave it. I don't think he's getting anywhere near my team. Over to Spurs, and I'm picking Ivan Perisic at 5.5 million. Further up the pitch, there's some premium options, but I think if we're looking for budget, 5.5 million for a guy who's been brought in by Conte. He had 8 goals, 7 assists last season. And, you know, this is a guy with a wicked right foot on him. He'll be cutting in, he'll be having a crack. And I think depending on injuries, depending on rotation, he could play further up the pitch at different points in the season. Now, that left wing back role, he'll want to make it his own. There's obviously Sessegnon, Davies, Reguilon. On the right, we've Doherty and Royale, Emerson Royale. At Spurs, there's a lot of competition, but I think he's been bought for a reason. I think he'll come in. I think he'll play. I think he'll score well. So definitely worth keeping an eye on for 5.5 million. For me, he's firmly classed as a good option. Over at West Ham, and we've our most expensive player of the day. Hands up, he's very expensive, But this isn't a budget video. This is a good value video. Jarrod Bowen, 4th best player in the game last season behind Trent, Salah and Son. He did get 17 assists to his XA of 7.36, so maybe he did overperform, something to be aware of, but he was involved in 51% of West Ham's goals. He is the main man there. 8.5 million. For me, I'll take him or leave him because I do think that money could be spent better, and he does play Man City and Spurs in the first 5 games. So Jarrod Bowen, our most expensive pick of the day. Over to Wolves, and this is the team that has the best fixtures for the start of the season. Wolves, we're going to pick Johnny. He's a wing-back, 4.5 million. He came back from injury, played the last 12 games on the bounce, got 2 goals, 96 final third passes, and as you can see from this heat map, the man loves to get forward. He could prove to be a great value option. I'm going to class him as a good option, and that rattles off the 20 and gives us our classification. You can see it now, how all the guys fared, our must-owns, who we're going to take or leave, who's a good option. You can see it all now. Subscribe to the channel for lots of FPL content coming up to the new season. Like the video before you go, and please let us know in the comments who you think is the best value player this season in FPL. And we'll see you next time. Bye bye.